please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
At the recent Global Mobility Summit, Prime Minister Modi outlined his vision for India based on the 7 C's principles. That's common, connected, convenient, congestion-free, charge, clean and cutting edge. Now, according to a joint report by Niti Aayog and Rocky Mountain Institute, accelerated adoption of electric and shared vehicles could save $60 billion in diesel and petrol costs while cutting down as much as 1 gigaton of carbon emissions for India by 2030. As this cleaner, greener mode of transport gains popularity in mind space, the government is targeting electric vehicles to account for 15% of all vehicle sales in the next 5 years. This comes at a time when industry still waits a long-term roadmap for mobility in India. So as auto companies set the wheels in motion to go electric, the questions that we're asking today is, what does India need to make electric vehicles a reality from a policy and infrastructure perspective? Good evening. Thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. I'm Shireen Bhan, and joining me now on our discussion, C.V. Raman, Executive Director R&D at Maruti Suzuki India, Sohinder Singh Gill, CEO of Hero Electric, and Rakesh Patna, Partner and National Leader Automotive Sector at EY India. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Rakesh, let me start by asking you, there was a lot of expectation at the MOVE Summit, A, that the FAME 2 would have been announced, which hasn't happened. B, there is now lack of clarity on whether FAME 2 will be in the same shape and form as FAME 1, or is the focus now going to shift from the actual car or bike to the battery, which now seems to be the thinking within government? How is this playing out within industry?
Yeah, I think there are a few changes that are happening while, this FAME 2 is in drafting mode. And you're right, we're hearing that there's a lot of emphasis on battery, which I think nothing wrong with that, by the way, because the battery cost makes up 50% of the cost of a vehicle. So we do need to be clear about, what will happen to battery from a localization perspective. Today, if you see the automotive industry in India, we are, most of the manufacturers are 85, 90% plus local. Yeah. And if we don't take care of this battery, you'll have an EV manufacturing industry in the future, which may be less than 50% local. So battery is a key issue. The second thing that's, I think, really evolved in the last few weeks is I think the debate has gone from just electric vehicles as a future to alternative fuels, which I think is the right thing, by the way. There are a set of technologies and a set of fuels, and I think they all have a place, in the future. And different manufacturers may take different positions there.
Absolutely. So it's right for the government to be tech agnostic and leave the marketplace to decide which technology it wants to bet on. But I want to talk about this from an industry's perspective. And Mr. Raman, let me ask you about this battery business that now is being talked about, that the subsidies, if at all, will actually be linked to the battery, not to the actual car, which makes sense for somebody like you because you are actually setting up a plant in Gujarat for lithium-ion batteries. So you understand where the government is coming from, and this certainly works for someone like you, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that would work from our perspective. And as you know, as rightly pointed out, we are setting up a plant in Gujarat, and that is because battery being a key component, and we need to make from the cell to the module to the pack. And unless we have completed all these aggregates and made local, then only, actually we'll be able to, in the long term, be able to reduce the cost going forward. So I think that is important. But having said that, really looking at a subsidy from a very long-term point of view may not really be feasible, but definitely to kickstart the industry, I think some kind of intervention is always helpful.
So, what are we talking about? I've heard this argument saying that because India is going to go down the EV road, we are going to see a drastic reduction as far as battery prices are concerned. Realistically, what kind of reduction are we talking about?
Well, that's crystal ball gazing at this point of time. Experts are saying that by 25, 26, the battery price would come down to below $100 from the current 200 plus. That's an average figure which we are talking about. But having said that, if you really look at the cell cost today, more than 65–70% of the cost is material cost, which is cobalt and lithium-ion. And today, if you really see the costs of these materials, they are only going up. And so whatever economies of scale are being, that is the only thing which we see going forward, which would help us reduce the cost. But from a material cost perspective, that is something.
The costs are actually going higher.
Yes, actually it's going high. So I think one needs to really see whether really we will be able to do that. That's the first point. And the second point is that we are looking at a chemistry today. The chemistries are evolving over a period of time. And so if we are able to develop a different kind of chemistry, which may drive the cost down, maybe also another alternative path which is there. And so that's why one needs to really look at the overall situation of the battery from the perspective that whether we are going only one path or whether we need to look at different paths.
Okay. Well, you've decided to take this path, which is the EV path, and you're actually, Maruti is going to be testing its prototypes. So you've got about 50 vehicles on the road fairly soon, and you will be testing them here in India. So you're making that bet already, irrespective of whether there is clarity from the government on subsidy and roadmap and so on and so forth. So what are you betting on? I mean, what kind of demand are you betting on?
See, really, if you look at from a four-wheeler perspective and specifically from Maruti Suzuki perspective, we are in the small car game. And really 75% of India is in the small car business. And having said that, we are looking at a technology agnostic solution. And we are there in alternate fuel. We have CNG vehicles. We also have hybrid vehicles, which we have launched, the mild hybrid. And now we are looking at understanding the EV ecosystem. And to understand the EV ecosystem, we have decided to build 50 prototypes, which we have already made in the Gurgaon plant. We want to run it in different areas of India, all over India, to understand the terrain, to understand the traffic conditions, the temperature, the humidity, and so on and so forth. So all of this is something which we need to understand, because ultimately when we have to give a product, we have to make sure that the customer does not have any issues. So that's something which is very, very key, to understand the different use cases also. Today, IC engine and whatever hybrids are there, they have a certain use case. But when we are looking at an electric vehicle technology, we have to look at different types of use cases, because you need to make it run over a long period of time in order to actually recover cost.
Right.
And so those use cases is something which we need to understand in the Indian perspective.
Okay, let me go across to Mr. Gill. Mr. Gill, one of the other aspects of the government policy or the thinking, because there is no policy at this point in time that's been finalized. So the thinking at this point in time is that the government should actually focus its efforts through subsidies, etc., to try and promote two-wheelers and public transport, as well as four-wheel shared and connected cars. Now, from a two-wheeler perspective, you're already in this space. What's the experience been, and what is it that you would now like to see from here on to ensure that this gathers momentum and pace?
Yeah, Shireen, as CV said, that lithium prices may come down in 4 to 5 years' time, and certainly electric vehicles, because of the scale advantage, may become affordable in 4 to 5 years' time, especially two-wheelers. We are talking of bridging the gap between today and that time. Certainly, electric mobility will happen in India, but if it can happen at its own pace, or it can be accelerated.
Okay.
So when we are talking about acceleration of electric mobility, particularly two-wheelers, these are the products which are now available on the road: good quality, high speed, lithium battery, portable batteries, so no requirement of charging infrastructure.
Right.
But the advantage of total cost of ownership is not yet seeping into the minds of people, because it comes over a period of 3 to 5 years. The sticker shock between a good electric two-wheeler and an equivalent scooter, say Activa or a Pleasure, is still 40,000 after subsidies.
Okay.
Now,
40,000 after
the
subsidy.
government can do something after subsidy of a good quality, equal performing product.
Okay.
Now, when we talk to the government, obviously there is nothing available in the exchequer to fund this type of a gap for a long period. So the solution that I have been advocating is that let's talk of only 3 years here, and let's just not talk of a big negative, but a small green cess on 2 crore petrol two-wheelers that we have on the road every year.
Okay.
500 rupees anybody could give who is spending 70,000 on a motorcycle can easily give 500 rupees. This 500 rupees leads to 1,000 crores into 3 years is 3,000 crores.
Okay.
Out of this 3,000 crores, if government spends 500 crores on clean air campaign under the Swachh Bharat campaign, it will be a beautiful weaving in of clean Bharat and clean air through electric mobility.
Right.
And the rest of 2,500 crore can easily fund additional 1 million electric two-wheelers of good quality, well certified on the road in a short span of 2 to 3 years. See, once you have this scale, this 1 or 2 million of them, then the positive word of mouth will start. The total cost of ownership advantage will seep in, and customers will tell others that, oh, go ahead and buy this electric two-wheeler. Okay. We have to cut this vicious circle somewhere.
All right, so your way of cutting the vicious circle is by way of another cess, but let me come back to you, Rakesh. And this might be perhaps a practical solution that the government looks at of imposing a cess, though we have plenty already to deal with. But, you know, in order for us to be able to get to this 1 million, 2 million number, especially when we talk about two-wheelers, what is it going to take? Since the infrastructure and the charging stations, etc., that is the requirement of both the public transportation as well as the car industry, may not necessarily be that daunting here.
So I think, you know, you have to get back to the use cases like Mr. Raman was saying, and you can look at the use cases for two-wheelers as well. There are lots of commercial applications of two-wheelers where the duty cycle of that vehicle on a daily basis is, you know, 100 plus kilometers a day, or maybe 150 plus kilometers a day. And they have a pretty, you know, defined kind of duty cycle as well in terms of, you know, local delivery, last mile delivery, e-commerce deliveries, all of those couriers, all of those kind of things. Let's take those and, you know, they're much more easier to electrify as a starting point. And that also builds the scale and the first, you know, couple of million vehicles. If we can do that, even in our larger cities. See, at the end of the day, we have to deal with this problem from a congestion point of view. If we add more vehicles and don't do anything with congestion, it's not really going to solve the problem. So we have to address congestion. We have to address the clean part of it in terms of the cleaner energies to be used. And, you know, find the use cases which builds that minimum scale that we need to develop a local industry. Otherwise, we're not going to have a local industry as well in the future.
On that note, we'll take a break, but when we return, we talk about how India can move towards cleaner, greener technology for the automotive space. That and more when we get back. Welcome back. You're watching Eye on India, and we're talking about solutions for a cleaner, greener India. The need for a holistic plan, because here, you know, we're talking about cars, we're talking about batteries, Mr. Gill is talking about two-wheelers, somebody's talking about the metro. I mean, how do we plan for our cities? You don't want to have more congestion on the roads. You don't want to move from having one kind of motorcycle or one kind of cars being replaced by another, albeit they might be better as far as emission is concerned. But we need a holistic plan. Is there any, you know, is there any possibility of being able to devise or design one? Or is everyone working in silos?
No, I think there is a lot of opportunity, and there are, of course, challenges, but I look at it as an opportunity. And how do I look at it as an opportunity? Because, you know, India is urbanizing, and when we are urbanizing, mobility today is being discussed as being part of that urbanization. And so it gives us a avenue that we can make solutions which can make this urbanization into something which is going to be clean and which is going to be better for the society. So is number one. Number 2 point is that the energy security and environment is key for this. And when we look at energy security today, 62% of the petrol is being used by two-wheelers and 36% by four-wheelers. If you look at diesel, we are looking at more than 50% being used by transport sector, and you know, about 13% by personal vehicles. So the maximum, and when we are looking at, you know, importing all of this crude, the first thing is how we can make the two-wheelers and the big transport buses and fleet vehicles convert into electric vehicles. And if with the last mile connectivity, if there is a and with the state and the central government working together.
Everybody else should do it, but not the car industry, is it?
No, not like that, not like that. Because that is where it is going to, you know, it may sound like that, but I'm just saying that this is something which is, you know, happening. And if you see the example of China, China today, every two-wheeler in China is electric vehicle. And maybe it is not having a different kind of regulations, but that is what it is happening, because a number plate is not possible for IC two-wheeler. But without EV1 is something which is easily available at 2,000, 3,000 RMB, which is about 30,000 rupees.
Right.
So I think that's where and how I see it and why I say that is scale. How do we get scale to get Make in India? I think that's the point.
Fair point. And I think, Mr. Gill, you know, this is the issue which I think nobody in a sense wants to address, that if China has said that all two-wheelers on their roads will now have to be electric two-wheelers, is that the route that India has to follow or needs to follow to make it mandatory? Otherwise, you can forget about this business of 1 million or 2 million. You know, if that happens over the next 5 to 10 years, that's all great. Do we basically now need to mandate that every manufacturer needs to have a certain percentage, whether it's 5%, 10%, 15% of their portfolio, which is clean, whether that's electric or hybrid or whatever the case may be, does the government need to get in there and mandate these things? Which it seemed that it was going that direction, but now there's been a U-turn.
See, I would love to propagate that, but leave aside mandate. Even when I talk of a mere 500 rupees, which is hardly anything at a showroom price, even that is so difficult to convince. There is a question of mandating. Now, mandating can happen, yes, in case of Amazon, Flipkart, or e-commerce deliveries, businesses that pollute. They can be mandated to convert their fleets into electric. But a customer on the road will not buy a product unless it is really lucrative for him. So merely by mandating, you're not reducing the price of a product. All I'm saying is a window of 3 years is required to reduce the sticker shock, to bring in parity with petrol two-wheelers, and the rest will happen automatically. Supply chain will start, everything will start after that. So sure, mandating, yes, but do we have the courage to mandate, and will that be a populist move?
Okay, that is the big question. But, you know, Rakesh, we come back again to being able to absorb this sticker shock. And now it seems fairly clear that the government also has limited resources to play around with. What else can we look at in terms of innovative ideas to try and absorb this sticker shock to start with? And at the end of the day, I mean, you know, if the difference between an IC engine which costs a certain amount and an electric vehicle which perhaps costs a little more, but if it can deliver on the same value proposition, then the consumer may still go in for that option. But today the choice seems to be that you're getting 90 with the IC engine and you're getting about 50 odd with the EV at a much higher cost. So that deficit needs to be bridged as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. As a buyer, whether you're a fleet owner or an individual consumer, you are going to look at your business case, right? Even if you look at hybrid sales in the US, they're very highly correlated with gas prices over there. As fuel prices go up and down, hybrid sales go up and down. That's very well established there. So as a consumer and as a buyer, there needs to be a business case. And today that business case gap can either be addressed through incentives or other indirect means like, you know, parking, congestion-free zones.
Right.
These are the other ways that, you know, certain states and governments, maybe not in India, but outside India, have approached this problem. While that doesn't really address the gap, but for those that may have a use case where the gap is a little bit lower than, or they don't have a choice, then they're forced to adopt this in anticipation of the cost coming down in future. I think the other interesting element one can look at is financing. There's a lot of debate on, do you finance the whole electric vehicle or do you finance the battery separately? And that could also make it another approach, because if somebody can take care of the risk on the battery cost, the vehicle cost itself is only 50%, and that may be a more manageable option. I don't think it's been explored enough, and one should look at exploring that a little bit more.
So, Mr. Raman, in terms of next steps now, as we await clarity from the government on the nuts and bolts of the policy, in terms of next steps, what can be done by industry, and in partnership with your competitors, perhaps, because that's the need of the hour as well. If you want to build scale across the board, I guess industry will also have to come together to create a supply chain that works for everybody. So what can we then realistically expect in terms of next steps?
I think before I say that, I would like to clarify here that certainly industry does not want mandates, okay? Because that's really not the path which one would like to tread, because that really is not a sustainable solution. Having said that, when I mentioned about two-wheelers...
No, the reason I say that is because we've seen this happen with emission norms, right? I mean, industry has dragged its feet, and until and unless you've had the court come into the way and say, make the move from either CNG or Euro 4 or BS6, we've had industry dragging its feet on this issue,
Sorry, Shirin. I think one of the things is that the BS6 is linked to the fuel.
Yeah.
I think that was key.
Right.
And so when the fuel is being available, I think the industry is not, backing out on the promise that by 2020 we will have BS6, even though we've just had 3 years to ensure that.
Right.
And that's not just about four-wheelers, two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Everybody is going to switch over in 3 years, and which has not happened. It's unparalleled in the world auto industry. So I think that's something which is there. But having said that, the point is that how do we kickstart and how do we make sure things happen? Why I mentioned two-wheelers was because two-wheelers, the battery typically is 1 or 1.5 kilowatt. That's something which can be charged at home.
Okay.
However, when you're looking at a four-wheeler, you're looking at a 20 kilowatt hour battery, and so the 20 kilowatt battery, and therefore it requires fast charging. It requires more time. So I think that's where the infrastructure difference is there. That's number one. Number two is that if we want to make things happen, I think scale is important. Aggregation of demand of various parts of the system is important. So where is the aggregation? What are the key components which are common across the value chain? If you see, it is going to be the battery, it is going to be the motor, and it is going to be the power electronics. All of this is something which needs to be, we need to develop that industry in India if we really want to do that. Over the past 30 years, we've built that infrastructure and development for the IC engine.
Absolutely.
However, the same thing needs to be done. And how do we do that? Aggregation of demand there is no other alternative. So two-wheeler and the four-wheeler, all of this needs to, we need to work together in order to get this aggregation. And not just that. When I mentioned about the energy security, the other thing was that we need to have a technology agnostic approach. So therefore, we need to just not look at electric vehicles, alternate fuels we're looking at, we're also looking at hybrids. Hybrids have a similar kind of ecosystem in terms of manufacturing, same as electric vehicle. That can bring in the scale, that can reduce the energy consumption. So that's something which we all need to look at. And so the industry needs to look at from all these aspects, that hybrid electric vehicle, alternate fuel technology. Over a period of next 10, 12 years, all these are going to coexist. We need to invest in that also, but there is also some obsolescence going to happen. So that's something which we need to work on.
And it's not like, the change is going to happen suddenly. It's going to be a very slow transition, and maybe instead of 2 or 3 different fuel types and alternative fuels, there may be 6 different alternative fuels by 2030, right? But the roadmap for all of them is going to be different.
Absolutely. Mr. Gill, so let me ask you then, India prides itself in being home to the supply chain for the auto industry globally today. What can we do to ensure that we can replicate that success in whether it's in the EV space or, the other cleaner, greener tech space? What would you suggest would be the next steps from here on?
See, I believe with the crude prices skyrocketing, and a little bit of willpower from the government and industry cooperation, this thing can be tipped in favor of electric mobility in a big way as far as two-wheelers are concerned, or even electric auto is concerned. Because they are already there in technology. They are available on the road. There are more than 400,000 there. That's why, like CV says, two-wheeler have to happen. If two-wheeler starts selling in 1 million, automatically people will start running for investing into motors, powertrains, batteries. Otherwise, who would invest? So the first things first, customer has to buy. Today the customer is not buying, except the guys who want to try it out. Anybody who compares with a motorcycle or a scooter is not buying an electric two-wheeler. Only people who want to experiment or otherwise are IT geeks, they are buying it, right? So the first thing has to be addressed. How do you get the first 1 or 2 million on the road? Yes, aggregation of demand is a great idea. telling institutions to bulk buy or mandating institutions is also possible. Financing is hygiene, it has to be there. Other privileges like parking, etc., should be thrown in. Green number plate is a good thing.
Right.
But the sum total of that is money.
Absolutely.
That 30,000, 40,000 rupees gap has to be bridged for 2 to 3 years. Otherwise, no going on talking of 10% of petrol two-wheelers to become electric in 3 to 4 years is a dream. It will happen by 2040 only.
Okay, it will happen by 2040. So the sticker shock that Mr. Gill spoke of, how do you best absorb that? How can industry come together to ensure that there can be demand created to make use of the principles of economies of scale, and what can the government do to try and absorb some of that sticker shock to make this viable, at least in the initial phases of the first 2 to 3 years? Gentlemen, this is still evolving, and I'm sure that we'll have many more such ideas as we take this conversation forward. But for this evening, appreciate you joining us here on Eye on India. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this special show. From all of us here, for now, goodbye and many thanks for watching.